Good morning.
Morning, Roshi.
Good to see all of you. I was thinking about what to talk about today, and I was reflecting on the last talk where we were discussing why we do mindfulness practice. And I had made kind of a throwaway comment in that talk that I thought we should circle back to, which was the fact that as far as we know, more than likely, the historical Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, would not have been stoked that a thing called Buddhism exists. And he would not have been stoked that there's all of these trappings and rituals and any of this stuff going on. And it's important to talk about that, I think, because while the forms of any mindfulness practice, whether it's yoga or shamatha meditation or Zen meditation or mindful running or whatever, while the forms are important, and we'll talk in a minute about why, it's also important not to get attached to the forms. And it's also important if you find yourself having an attachment to the forms or an aversion to the forms, to regard that as part of your mindfulness practice, right? And by the way, you guys are welcome to take notes on your phone or on a notepad. I'd like you guys to not be doing things on your phone that are not taking notes, please. And it's fairly obvious if you are, so thank you. And also just to be very clear about kind of my intentions, as the founder of this program and someone who's now very occupied doing things other than being here, I come in every Wednesday and give a talk because I'm asked to, and it seems to be helpful, and I want to keep the mindfulness alive here. It's also good for me to teach. It's kind of like when you're a 12-step sponsor. It's good for you to teach the 12 steps because it kind of keeps it at the front of your mind. So I enjoy teaching. And some of you have chosen to go really deep in your practice while you've been here, and some of you don't, and that's completely fine. The reason we wanted to have a mindfulness-based program, as we talked about before, was so that it would be offered and very easy to access. Because for Maureen and I, we had to cobble together therapy, mindfulness, 12-step work, body practices, all those things when we were in our 20s. And so we thought if we could just put it all together in one place for the right kind of person, that would be extremely helpful. It would be extremely useful. So that's why we're here. And you guys are welcome to do as much or as little of this as you want. I think it's like my son doesn't like pickleball, right? I don't think he's ever going to like it, but partly he doesn't like it because he's not good at it, because he hasn't spent time on it. And some people showed up to our pickleball group the other day and they'd never played before, so me and another friend helped, because our teacher has been out hurt, helped them kind of learn. And I was thinking about that when I was playing pickleball this morning before I came over, that I've gotten to be pretty good. Some of you guys have played with me. I'm not the best, but I'm pretty good. Through what? Through lessons, instruction, and practice. So there's a reason why we call it a mindfulness practice, and there's a reason why there's mindfulness teachers, because the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. So some of you guys will never like this, and that's really okay. But before you decide if you like it or not, I would encourage you to get some instruction, whether from me or Ryan or Faith or Ray or Jared or whomever, and try it and see. Because nobody comes to the cushion and is like, oh, this is amazing. I feel so relaxed. Everybody comes to the cushion and goes, ooh, it's very uncomfortable in my body. And ew, I'm having all these thoughts and feelings that I do not want to be with. Blah. One of my fellow Zen teachers who used to teach here talks about the barrel of monkeys that is your mind. Some of them are a little aggressive. They're not all that nice. I personally find that since I am stuck with my mind and my heart and my karma, I would rather know them very intimately and be able to work with them very intentionally, or if you will, very mindfully, instead of just letting them run my life. I would rather intentionally lean in and get to know myself well and get to know my mind well. The interesting thing about mindfulness or Zen training or any of this is that you can train your mind to start to do certain things and behave in a certain way. And it's very helpful. For example, I've trained my mind to focus on gratitude and to focus on surrender of outcomes. It took me a long time to do that, and I'm still not perfect at it, but it's way better than it used to be. So I'm way less unhappy. I've also trained my mind to not take action when I'm angry. Best thing to do when you're angry is nothing. No good comes of it when you go act out or you scream and yell at someone or whatever. It's just not helpful. So there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of opportunity. But all this is an offering. It's not meant to turn you into anything or change you. I actually have a very strong aversion to what I call the Zen robots. Go to any monastery, and I've spent time in quite a few, and you'll see people who are very clearly like deep in their practice and very intentional and kind of very graceful in how they move around and approach the practice. Then you'll see people where they're just like really tight, and you can just tell. You can tell when someone is sitting on the cushion dissociating, avoiding their problems, or they're sitting there working actively with their problems. You can tell when someone's doing what we call spiritual bypass, trying to kind of go around their problems then through. And I'm not interested in turning you guys into Zen robots, because I don't think that's the point of what we're doing here, and also it's not good for you. So I just wanted to be really clear about all of that. So, having said all that, just a reminder that the Buddha, when he had his enlightenment experience, he did not go by the domain, www.buddharules.net and set up a Patreon account, And he wasn't like trying to create a cult or any kind of religious order or anything like that. He was just different. And people noticed that he was different, and they got attracted to that and wanted to learn from him. And because of the way that Indian culture was, and because of the Hinduism that he had, the tradition he'd come out of, of course, a lot of Hinduism kind of got absorbed into what he was teaching, but he was just teaching the things that he had realized. And he was really adamant about have your own experience. He was not into, you must do it this way. He was into, if you insist upon me telling you what I have discovered, this is what it is. And if it applies to you, great. And if it doesn't, no problem. And because it seems to resonate with the human experience, it's survived for a long time, and it eventually went from India to China. But Bodhidharma, who brought it from India to China, he said very clearly, this is a special transmission outside the scriptures based on your experience. In other words, all the canonical things, all of the words of the Buddha that had started getting written down, people were studying that. And they were thinking that was it, and not the direct experience. God bless you. And there's a saying in Zen, the finger pointing to the moon is not the moon. When you're driving, the GPS will show you the map. Google Maps will show you where you are. But the image of where you are and where you are is not the same, right? Would anyone disagree with that? So everything you read, everything you hear me say, everything you read about the Dharma, any of this, it's simply to help you in your journey. But if it doesn't apply to you, don't bother with it. No problem. I remember years ago, I was with my wife at an event that her teacher at the time was visiting the town we were living in, and he is a very well-known teacher who's written a lot of books. And my sensibilities were a little, I wouldn't say offended, but I found that he was being venerated in a way that I didn't really find that appealing. But, to each their own. Anyway, he gave a talk, and then he had a question and answer, and this woman asked him a question, and before she asked the question, she said, "I'm really sorry, Rinpoche, I haven't been practicing very much." And he said, "I don't care." And everybody was like, "What?" He said, "I practice for me, and I teach to make it easier for you to practice because I think practice is useful. But if you don't want to practice, don't practice. It's totally fine. It's totally fine." And I feel that way too. Like if this is not helpful, don't do it. But if it is helpful, it'll change your life. And I accepted a long time ago that it's not helpful for everybody. It's been incredibly helpful for me. I think it was helpful for most people if you try it, but it's not for everyone. Anyway, as the Dharma traveled through China, of course, it absorbed a lot of Taoism. As it traveled through Japan, it absorbed a lot of Shintoism and samurai culture. As it traveled through America, it's absorbed the great American religion, psychotherapy. The notion that mindfulness helps me to live with intention and manifest my highest good, you're not going to hear that kind of talk in Japan or China. You're just not. That is a very American statement. And one that, by the way, I don't disagree with, but it's just, should we ever encounter an alien culture and teach them the Dharma, I'm sure that elements of their culture will get mixed in. But the whole point is that it's very practical. It's not meant to alienate anyone. It's not meant to upset you. Why is there an image on the altar? Why do we even have an altar? Well, there are sitting groups that don't. There are sitting groups that have just completely gone away from that. People don't wear samue like what I'm wearing. They don't wear rakasus. They just sit in their street clothes. They don't use Dharma names. I think something is lost when you do that, personally, but I also understand the appeal. Because you don't want to be exclusive, you don't want to be putting on airs. Going back to the pickleball analogy, there are people who have really nice paddles. There are people who have really nice shoes. Actually, one of the guys that I play pickleball with, his son-in-law is a Major League Baseball player and has all these big contracts with Nike, and he had some credit left over with Nike. I'm not sure how that works. Nike gives him a certain amount of gear credit, I guess, every year. So he said to his father-in-law, "My friend, do you want to design yourself some pickleball shoes for free?" So he's got these pickleball shoes, and inside the tongue it says, one says pickle and the other one says master. So it's a big red strap. And it's like if you were to show up for your first time to play pickleball and you saw him with his really nice paddle and his really fancy shoes, you'd be like, "Whoa, I don't belong here." But as we all know, you can show up and play in your flip-flops and some paddle you carved out of wood if you want. I'm sure you'll start doing pickleball in the woods, when you're out there. You'll find a way, right? But the equipment itself is not the point. The point is the game. But you can't play the game without a court, and the court is a certain size, and there are certain rules. And why is that? When I was playing this morning, I really loved pickleball. It was very joyful. It's very joyful. But you have to have a container in which to have the joy. If I'm playing by one set of rules, and you're playing by one set of rules, and you're playing by one set of rules, and you're playing by one set of rules, and we're trying to play each other, it's not going to go very well, right? So the reason we have certain decorum and certain etiquette and certain protocols within a Zendo is just to make it easier for everyone to practice together. If you're practicing by yourself, it doesn't matter. You can stand on your head. It's fine. You can have, you can be blasting Dua Lipa or whatever it is you guys listen to. See if you can be mindful throughout that. No problem. But the way that I was trained was you sit quietly, because you want to allow space for things to arise. And you try not to move around because it's distracting other people. Also, when we were sitting this morning, I had such a bad itch in my foot. And I did not scratch it. Not because I was trying to torment myself, but because one of my teachers taught me to just notice the body sensations. They're not there, then they're there, then they get more intense, and then they start to fade, and then they're gone. And the more time you spend on the cushion watching that, and the more time you spend on the cushion watching your mind, your cravings, your impulses, your anger, your lust, your agitation, all of it, you start to realize that it's all ephemeral. It's very temporary. I used to be an incredibly impatient person. This practice has really taught me patience, perseverance. I have a very difficult client I'm working with right now, and for reasons I won't bore you guys with, it doesn't make sense for me to bail. It would be bad for the client, it would be bad for me. It just doesn't make sense. There's a natural runway. We're not going to be working together for much longer. And it bothers me sometimes. I'd like to have it end sooner, but everything in the last 30 years of this practice has showed me it just will end on its own. I don't need to stress about it. Think about all the situations in your life that are bothering you. Do you really think they're going to last? They're not. If you were really sitting with your practice every day and really recognizing the transient nature of things, how much less would things bother you? I predict things would bother you 87% less. You cannot eliminate your suffering. You can't. So much of it comes from how we approach our life. And this practice really helps with that. I mentioned earlier the forms too. So I find when I go into a Zendo in my lineage, it's very calming. In the same way that when I step on a pickleball court, it's very calming. I recorded an EP last summer, and I'm going to do it again this fall. It will be way more relaxing this time because I know the people in the studio, I know the studio, I know the order of operation, I know how to do it. When you know how to do something, you kind of know the protocols, and you step into it. It's very soothing. It's very comforting. And when we scrape up against things about it that we don't like, that's very telling. It just tells us about our own mind. But there are some stories that are sort of interesting. One of them is there was a very small monastery that at the time was just the teacher and one student. And the teacher went away. And there was a cold snap, freezing, and all the firewood got used up. And on the last night, the student had been left behind. There was a wooden image of the Buddha on the altar, and he burned it. And his teacher got home, he was very angry. How could you burn the altar, the Buddha? He said, "Teacher, would you rather that the living Buddha, me, be dead because I froze to death, or would you rather that the dead Buddha on the altar give me life?" Each of us has that enlightened nature, that awakened nature. So the images are just that. They're just a reflection. It's like a mirror. It's just a reflection of your own goodness, your own wisdom. It's not, in and of itself, it's not anything. Now that image has particular meaning for me because my late teacher's wife made that. She's an incredible artist. And my late teacher gave it to me. So it has particular personal meaning for me. Also, what it depicts is Manjushri Bodhisattva sitting on a tiger, which represents you pacifying your own mind, which I think is a very beautiful image and a good image to aspire toward. But in and of itself, that's plaster and paint. That's all it is. So you shouldn't overly revere it, nor should you overly disparage it, because it does represent something, but it only represents something because we decide it represents something. It's only 9:52 in the morning because we've all decided that's what it is. And by the way, in New York City, it's 12:52 in the afternoon. I have a number of family members living in Australia right now, and usually when I talk to them, it's tomorrow for them. It's my evening and it's their morning. So even the concept of time, or even what day it is very relative. So we shouldn't get overly hung up on the trappings of this practice. If you find yourself wanting to be a great Zen student, or you find yourself wanting to not be a Zen student at all, just regard it as interesting information. Oh, that's okay. Where are my attachments popping up today? What am I trying to control that I can't control? What am I being closed-minded about? That's what the practice can show you. I think it's a mistake to avoid the forms, but it's also a mistake to get too attached to the forms. We could all sing in here all afternoon bluegrass music, and it would probably benefit in some way. We don't have to sit here quietly. But, that's what Zen practice is. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
I feel like it's like hard for me to find the balance when I'm sitting between like sitting and sort of just being and focusing on my breath, and then like having thoughts or feelings or things arise, and knowing sort of like how long to spend with those, and am I spending too much time on those, and am I getting too distracted? Do you have any like thoughts on sort of the balance of that, and how do I meditate? Just any thoughts? Any comments?
I have no thoughts.
I know.
I have no comments.
Sweet. Thank you, Roshi.
What do y'all think? How do you find balance when you're sitting and practicing between kind of the tension that he described?
I think the mind is like its own entity, but it's also an active process that we can engage with and like utilize intentionally. So when I'm in that space wondering like how much attention I should be giving to certain thoughts, I ask myself if it's in like the highest good of my evolution, if that makes sense. So yeah, what's the usefulness, and is it serving me? Is it like contributing good to my experience, and therefore how I impact the people around me? And so like when sitting with thoughts, you can choose how much attention you're giving to them and how much you're energizing them. And yeah, in that way, like meditation gives us the like increasing power to direct our stream of thought. Yeah.
Love that.
I think for me personally, what I found was helpful for myself is to honestly just stop worrying about it so much, and to just let my mind naturally drift and wander as it will, and rather than be thinking like, oh, I should be like thinking about my breath instead of this, or I should be thinking about this instead of my breath, or whatever. It's that I'm just going to observe what my mind is doing at any given moment of like, oh, I'm thinking about this right now, I'm having this thought right now, or having this thought, or I'm focusing on my breath now. And I think for me, what I find is like when I sort of surrender that and just focus on taking the backseat and simply observing, the balance comes naturally for myself.
Yeah, I agree with all what everyone said. For me, it's kind of just like a set of what people have already said, but for me it's reflection or just awareness. I don't know, recently, outside of meditation, I find myself redoing, not old, like bad habits, but just like, I don't know, that like work. I can sometimes be a bit more judgmental than I want to be, or things can bother me a bit more than I want them to. And yeah, just kind of trying to reflect and just be like aware, but not without any judgment, like with no, like not it's bad or good, just be like, why am I doing this and does it help? And if it doesn't, I just kind of go, okay. That can be a pitfall because I sometimes do, as you said, the American religion of psychoanalysis. I just psychoanalyze myself too much sometimes, but it helps. Just looking at it and disconnecting, as Ryan said, and if it's the greater good for my evolution, as Natalia said.
Yeah, I love that.
I think one thing that you said that stuck out to me, and I have the exact same question as you, and I was actually planning on talking to him again to you about it in meditation instruction later, but you talked about this client that you're dealing with and how there's just a natural evolution and a natural course that it's going to run, and how it wouldn't benefit you nor the client to leave right now. And so maybe there are things you wish to change, you're just kind of going to stay on the ramp until it's time to leave. And so I guess in some ways just choosing to trust and choosing to observe what's happening in the mind, and just, I guess, believing that there's going to be a natural course in evolution. So just observing and just letting it play out, and just kind of choosing just to take the next step and see where it takes you.
That's right. Yeah, everything that was said, I think, is right. And if you're feeling unclear about something, think about it. If you have a bag of water and you poke a small hole in it, what's going to happen eventually?
No water.
We'll see.
Eventually, all the water will be gone. Well,
Yeah,
right.
you don't.
Assuming the laws of physics stay the same. So, if you're feeling unclear about something, just the longer you sit with it, the more clear it will get. And unless you're getting into some kind of psychosis, in which case you should stop. And also, this is why we have teachers, to kind of point you in the right direction. It's very hard to get this by yourself, So I'm here every Wednesday morning, for example, and sometimes people come see me and sometimes they don't. I'm always available to set up another appointment if you guys want to talk to me more. I used to call my teacher every day because I wanted the instruction. I wanted to learn. And when I lived at a Zen center, I would sit with my teacher about 4 or 5 times a week, including sometimes at 5:30 in the morning. And that's intense, especially when you're young. But if you want a spiritual shack, don't make a lot of effort. If you want a spiritual palace to live in, then make a lot of effort. It's just pretty clear correlation. Like what we put our energy into, it has results. Put your energy into self-awareness, spiritual practice, honesty, integrity, those kinds of things, you have certain outcomes. If you put energy into avoiding and seeing what you can get away with, and that's going to have certain outcomes too. And that sounds judgy, and it's not. It's just that I've done both. And the bad news is there's no shortcuts. It takes a lot of time. But the good news is that it's just true that what we put energy into grows. And when you have those kinds of questions, how do I stay in balance? It's almost like just keep asking yourself, am I in balance? Because you're never going to be in perfect balance. So just keep asking yourself, am I in balance right now? And adjust. A little too tight, a little too soft. Make an adjustment. The Buddha himself actually had this analogy, which is it's like a guitar string. If you make a guitar string too sharp, in other words, you tighten it too much, what will eventually happen?
Break.
It'll snap. If it's too loose, what happens?
It'll fall off.
I'll floppy.
Fall off or no sound. Yeah, floppy. So you want your practice to be in the middle, and we could do a whole talk about the middle way, but we're kind of out of time. But that's the fundamental thing. We all know people who never exercise, and consequently their body doesn't work super well. And then we also probably all know people who over-exercise, so they're constantly injured. I'm not talking about anyone in particular. I'm just saying, it's the same with practice. I've known many people in my Zen career who burned really hot, but then they burned out. I'm more interested in sustaining my practice for my lifetime, which means some days I sit 10 minutes, some days I don't sit at all. Usually that doesn't go very well for me. I try to sit 20 or 30 minutes a day, or try to do more longer practice periods regularly, but no practice is probably going to not be as effective as some practice, and an unsustainable amount of practice is going to lead you to no practice. Just find the balance. And when you are sitting, find the balance. You notice yourself being too rigid, you just soften. If you notice yourself like this. I used to spend the first 2 full days of a week-long retreat in fantasy and recall. For a while, it really bothered me, and I never even talked to my teacher about it because I was so embarrassed. And then I realized after a certain point, this is just what my brain needs to do, just to dump out and empty out, and then I can have the insight and the quiet. Totally fine, as long as you're aware of what's happening. Any other thoughts or questions?
Who are you?
I don't know. Yeah.
How do you, this is something I struggle with a lot, and especially at work at the moment. How do you not be bothered by other people obviously suffering? And I don't mean like the people who, like specifically people who are like very negative and complaining constantly, and are like, at least I'm assuming, causing their own suffering. How do you just...
I'm very bothered by it.
Oh. Okay.
I would be skeptical of anyone who was supposedly a mindfulness practitioner who wasn't bothered by people suffering. But I think the trick is, if you're bothered by someone else's suffering and you perceive it as being self-inflicted, again, the middle way. I find it helpful to say to them, hey, it seems like you're having a hard time, and if you want any help with it, let me know. But not try to impose my will on them, because that's a fool's errand. They'll just resent you for it. So bearing witness and noticing it and feeling it is okay, and then you've got to just focus on what you can control. Happy to talk more with you about it sometime if you want.
Yeah.
All right, I'm mindful of the time, so I'm going to wrap there. But thank you all for being here, and again, feel free to participate in as much of the Zazen Kai today as you want to. And those of you watching, if you're still watching and you haven't subscribed, please do. And never hurts to smash that like button. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Roshi.
Thank you, Roshi.